The war between Russia and Ukraine didn't just appear out of nowhere in 2022. It's a story that's been building for centuries, a story of empires, revolutions, betrayals, and survival. To understand today's invasion, we have to go back to the roots, when Ukraine was pulled into the orbit of a rising Russian empire. In the late 1700s, Ukraine's fate took a sharp turn. Once caught between powers like Poland and the Ottoman Empire, much of its land was swallowed by the expanding Russian Empire. Moscow didn't just want territory, it wanted control over identity. Ukrainian language and culture were pushed aside, replaced by Russian schools, Russian officials, Russian everything. But Ukrainians resisted in their own way. Through folk songs, literature, and secret societies, they held on to the dream of being more than just a province in someone else's empire. This silent resistance planted seeds that would survive for centuries. Fast forward to the chaos of World War I. Empires were collapsing, revolutions were erupting, and for the first time in generations, Ukraine saw a chance. In 1917, after the Russian Revolution, Ukraine declared its independence, forming the Ukrainian People's Republic. But freedom didn't come easy. Civil war swept across the region, with armies from Russia, Poland, and even Germany fighting on Ukrainian soil. For a moment, it looked like Ukraine might stand on its own. But by 1921, the dream was crushed. The Red Army marched in, and Ukraine was absorbed into Lenin's Soviet Union. The 1930s brought one of the darkest chapters in Ukraine's history. Under Stalin, forced collectivization of farms created a man-made famine known as the Holodomor. Entire villages starved. Millions died. And speaking about it was forbidden. Then came World War II. Ukraine once again became a battlefield. Invaded by Nazi Germany, then reconquered by the Soviets, the land was devastated. When the war ended, Ukraine was back under Moscow's control. Broken, but not erased. For decades, Ukraine was called the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. Its factories and farmlands fueled the USSR's power. But resentment simmered beneath the surface. Dissidents and intellectuals kept alive the idea of independence, even as the KGB cracked down on any sign of nationalism. By the 1980s, cracks were forming in the Soviet Union. Economic stagnation, political unrest, and the rise of movements in Eastern Europe gave Ukrainians hope. In 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine declared independence. For the first time in centuries, they were free, at least on paper. The 1990s were messy. Independence was real, but the country faced corruption, weak institutions, and constant pressure from Russia. One moment seemed like a guarantee of safety. In 1994, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, the third largest arsenal in the world, in exchange for promises from Russia, the US, and the UK to respect its borders. But those promises would not last. Over the next 2 decades, Ukraine was pulled between two worlds, Russia in the east and Europe in the west. The turning point came in 2013, when Ukraine's president rejected a deal with the European Union and turned toward Moscow. The people erupted. The protests, known as Euromaidan, filled the streets of Kiev. The government fell, but Moscow struck back. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, violating the very promises it had made decades earlier. At the same time, separatist movements, backed by Moscow, ignited a bloody war in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass region. The conflict never really ended. It just went cold. Until 2022. On February 24, 2022, the illusion of peace shattered. Russian missiles rained down on Ukrainian cities. Tanks rolled across the border. What Putin thought would be a quick victory turned into a grinding war of attrition. Ukraine, outnumbered but not outmatched, pushed back with everything it had. Supported by Western weapons and global solidarity, it has resisted against overwhelming odds. The war continues today, but its roots go back centuries, to empire, revolution, famine, and betrayal. The war in Ukraine isn't just about land or politics. It's about a nation's right to exist, to choose its own future, and to break free from the shadow of empire. And no matter how this war ends, one thing is clear. Ukraine's fight for survival is rewriting the history of Europe. In our next video, we'll uncover the brutal Syrian civil war, a battle that tore apart a nation and drew in global powers. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join us as we keep uncovering the real history of wars, from today, back into the past.